I still remember the day my ordinary life took an unexpected turn. For years, my days had followed the same predictable pattern. I would wake up early, make a cup of coffee, and stand by the kitchen window watching the neighborhood slowly come to life. At 59, I often told myself that age was only a number. I exercised regularly, took care of my appearance, and tried to maintain the confidence I once had, but deep inside there was a loneliness that never seemed to disappear. Living alone had become routine, yet the silence in my house often felt heavier than I wanted to admit. Over the previous few months, one small part of my day had become something I secretly looked forward to. His name was Anthony, a young delivery driver who regularly brought packages to my door. He was 23, energetic, polite, and always greeted people with a genuine smile. At first, I barely noticed him, but over time I found myself paying more attention whenever I heard a delivery truck nearby. I even caught myself ordering things online more frequently than necessary just for the chance to exchange a few words with him. I knew it was foolish, and I constantly reminded myself that he was much younger than me, yet every time I saw him, something inside me seemed to wake up. One afternoon, as I was returning home from running errands, I noticed Anthony riding his motorcycle through the neighborhood. Before I could wave, the front tire slipped on the road, sending him tumbling to the ground. My heart nearly stopped. I dropped everything and rushed toward him. Thankfully, he wasn't seriously hurt, but his arm and knee were scraped badly enough to make him wince. Despite the pain, he tried to reassure me with a smile and insisted he would be fine. I refused to listen. I helped him lift the motorcycle, guided him inside my house, and sat him down in the living room while I brought out a first aid kit. As I carefully cleaned and bandaged his injuries, we talked more than we ever had before. Away from the rushed exchanges at the front door, I began to notice things about him I hadn't seen. He wasn't just charming, he was thoughtful, respectful, and surprisingly mature. The conversation flowed naturally, and before long the awkwardness disappeared. He thanked me for helping him, admitting that most people barely looked at him beyond the packages he delivered. I told him that he deserved more credit than he gave himself and that I admired the kindness he showed others. There was a brief silence afterward, one of those moments where neither person knows exactly what to say, yet neither wants the conversation to end. Eventually he mentioned that the long commute between his job and his current apartment was becoming difficult. Rent prices closer to town were far beyond what he could afford, and his landlord was threatening to force him out. Without thinking too much about it, I told him about the small apartment beside my house that had been sitting empty for months. I offered it to him at a price he could actually manage. The surprise on his face quickly turned into gratitude. He thanked me repeatedly, but I could already tell he was considering it. Before leaving, he asked for my phone number so we could discuss the details. The next morning, I looked out the window and saw a moving truck parked beside the apartment. Anthony had arrived with a couple of friends and was already unloading boxes. Watching him settle into the place filled me with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. Later that afternoon, I brought over coffee and offered to make dinner for everyone. His friends eventually left, but Anthony stayed behind. That evening, for the first time, we sat together not as a homeowner and tenant or a customer and delivery driver, but simply as two people sharing a meal and enjoying each other's company. We talked for hours about life, family, regrets, dreams, and all the roads that had led us to that moment. I found myself opening up about the loneliness I had carried for years, while he spoke honestly about the struggles he faced trying to build a future for himself. By the end of the evening, I realized that what I felt wasn't simply curiosity anymore. Something meaningful was beginning to form between us, and although I didn't fully understand where it might lead, I knew I wanted to see him again. Over the following weeks, Anthony became a regular part of my life. Because he lived next door, we naturally crossed paths almost every day. Sometimes we shared coffee in the morning, other times we talked in the evenings after he finished work. What surprised me most was how easy everything felt. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a growing friendship that seemed to deepen with every conversation. The house that had once felt empty suddenly felt alive. I found myself laughing more often, looking forward to tomorrow instead of simply getting through today. One evening, after helping him unpack the last of his belongings, I invited him over for dinner again. This time it felt different. The atmosphere was more relaxed, more personal. We sat at the dining table long after the meal was finished, talking about everything and nothing at the same time. Anthony listened carefully whenever I spoke, and unlike many people, he never treated me as though my age defined who I was. Instead, he saw the person beneath the years. When he complimented my strength, my determination, and the way I had built a life for myself, I felt genuinely seen. It had been a very long time since anyone had looked at me with that kind of attention. As the evening continued, our conversations became more honest. I admitted that there were days when loneliness felt overwhelming and that I often wondered whether the most meaningful parts of my life were already behind me. Anthony disagreed immediately. He told me that people often underestimate themselves and that he believed there were still many exciting chapters waiting for me. His words stayed with me because they felt sincere rather than flattering. The connection between us continued growing naturally. We spent weekends exploring nearby towns, visiting small cafes, and taking long walks where conversations seemed endless. The more time we spent together, the clearer it became that neither of us wanted this friendship to remain ordinary. There was trust between us, understanding, and a sense of comfort that neither of us had expected to find. One night, after another long conversation, we finally acknowledged what had been building for weeks. It wasn't a sudden decision or an impulsive moment. It was the realization that we genuinely cared about each other and that our lives had become brighter since meeting. From that point forward, we stopped pretending our feelings didn't exist. The relationship brought challenges, of course. We knew some people would judge the age difference, and we understood that our situation wasn't typical. Yet every concern seemed less important than the happiness we found together. Anthony brought energy and optimism into my life, while I offered stability, support, and understanding during difficult moments. Instead of focusing on what others might think, we focused on what we felt when we were together. Several months later, while relaxing on the porch one quiet evening, Anthony suggested taking a trip to a small beach town he had always wanted to visit. The idea immediately excited me. It wasn't really about the destination. It was about creating new memories together and stepping into a future neither of us had expected. As we sat side by side discussing possible plans, I realized how much my life had changed since the day he fell from his motorcycle in front of my house. What had started as a simple act of helping someone in need had grown into a connection that transformed both of us. The loneliness that once defined my days no longer controlled me. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the future. Looking back now, I understand that life can change in a single moment when you least expect it. Sometimes the people who enter your life unexpectedly become the ones who leave the deepest impact. Anthony's arrival didn't just break the routine of my days. It reminded me that new beginnings can appear at any age, and that happiness often arrives when you've almost stopped looking for it.